Well, I'm thinking about it. This is where, like, I was sitting looking up at the ash tree there, behind the lilac, and I could see that some of the leaves were rolled into cones. I don't know if you can see that, but that's how I knew that I had ash leaf cone roller on that. It's just sitting on my deck. So, I'm going to let James talk to you about a book he read. Can you tell?
With the cone roller, I can see it up there.
Yeah.
I never would have known what it was.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Not much you can do about it.
Well,
you could go up there and cut off.
No, there's no point with that. But
okay.
Yeah, it's fine. It'll just keep getting it every year.
Okay.
This
It
time.
won't kill it?
No.
Good.
It's still photosynthesizing. The leaves are just rolled into a different shape. But
kind of different. So it's more like it's not really parasiting it, but living out.
Yeah, they don't end up killing it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a smart kind of.
I can put that over here if you like.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to want to stay up.
Doesn't seem to want to stay. And anyway, you have to eat your dinner.
Something.
There we go. It'll stay there.
Yeah, you're better doing that. Then I am through long practice. So this is what is this called? Break On Through. And it's written by James Riordan and a some sort of Polish name, Paciorowski or something like that. Prochnitsky. Probably pronounced differently. What's the first name? Jerry Prochnitsky. So he probably pronounces his name very differently. Prochnitsky. Yeah, see, that's Polish. Anyway, the main writer seems to be James Riordan. He gets the picture and the flyleaf in the back. And so this was published in 1991. This is a nice new republication. And so this guy's a music journalist, and a lot of it is pretty breathy. Well, some of it's hyperventilating. Yeah. Anyway, just some vagrant checking out garbage in the back.
I don't think so. I'm gonna go check it out. You just keep talking.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
You keep talking about the book.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something else. Someone doing their rounds. Anyway, it's about Jim Morrison's life. He was born in 1944, died in 1971. Talks about all sorts of little...
I couldn't find anything, but...
it looks suspicious.
It's
because that's the only
lately
garbage
we've noticed there's been people who have, like, there was the clothes thing that was obvious about the drug deal, and now there's people who are picking bottles with little, like, Safeway kind of grocery bags, and it's just nuts, because why would anybody who picks bottles use, like, little tiny Safeway bags or whatever? It doesn't make any sense. And
see, that guy was there
so we were
for
noticing
about
that.
10 seconds.
Yeah.
You don't pick bottles that way.
No. And plus, he was near
I think he
Maynard's
picks,
truck. He
yeah.
wasn't near the garbage
I don't know
bins.
exactly what
but I don't know. I don't know exactly what. I'm gonna figure it out.
I think he picked something up.
He did. So that's why I didn't find anything, because he picked it out of the truck.
I'm just going to check and see, because I got the perfect angle.
Well, he was right there. I could see he was behind the truck. So anyway, we know it's obviously about drugs, because nobody picks bottles with little tiny Safeway bags. They wouldn't. Why would they? So that's... So my guess is they have drop spots. He was on a bicycle with his Safeway bag.
And he had a backpack.
And
yeah, they dumped it right in the corner of the Maynard's truck.
Yeah. So, anyway, so that's what's happening. I don't. I'm gonna catch it one day, and I'll be
Well,
able
we
to
just
show.
caught it, really.
Yeah, I suppose. But anyway.
Yeah, like
Because they deal drugs out of the apartment building that's right near my house.
Hmm.
And it's obvious, and the police don't do anything about it because some of them must be on the take.
it could be.
Because it's been going on for years.
One neighbor complained 10 years ago, maybe?
I don't know. It's been going on forever.
Now, part of it's just laziness. It's called community policing, but
Yeah.
the synonym for community policing in the Urban Dictionary should be, I think that's the slang dictionary, is, on the internet, is, it should just be a 4-letter word, lazy. Or laziness, really not a 4-letter word. But their reaction was, what can you do about this problem? Holy smokes, like...
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
They did tell her that.
So, and that was the general solution for community policing. Well, community policing, that was kind of tried in the Wild West, something like that. Oh, it was the Wild West.
But there's lots of different ways they've
so
been dealing
if
drugs.
the
I mean,
law isn't
it's
adequate
so
and it
educational
isn't
living here.
enforced adequately, or if it isn't, the laws aren't interpreted by the judiciary adequately, what do you get? Oh yes, you get vigilante action. What can you do about this? Well, it would
people
involve
will.
a lot of baseball
Yeah,
bats and things like that.
exactly.
That's ridiculous.
Don't want to leave it up to the public to...
No, because it
Won't
ends
work
up being
out.
summary justice and lynchings and all that kind of stuff. Now, sometimes they get things right, but sometimes they get things nastily wrong. So,
Anyway. So, go on about Jim Morrison.
oh yeah. Well,
Interrupted by
going
a
from the
local drug deal.
ridiculous to the sublime, and then the sublime, I guess, ended up being ridiculous. Well, sublime is overstatement. That's kind of a little bit like these rock critics, they're amazing. Anyway, there's Jim Morrison kind of thought he was a shaman. He said that when he was a pup, he wrote a poem about it, part of the poem about it, that he was, I don't know, how old was he, about 5 years old or 10 years old, can't remember, but he saw an accident where a bunch of Indians were killed, and he claimed the soul of at least one of them crawled into his mind or something like that. And so he had this idea that he was a shaman. And I think it was just a selling feature for Jim Morrison as much as anything, but there's a whole section on shamanism there. It's all, like, if I were writing, I'd be saying, well, this is what shamanism is supposed to be like. This is kind of like Jim Morrison's interpretation, his interpretation of the same sort of thing. But it's a tribal sort of thing. It's no one appointed Jim Morrison as shaman over anyone, really. So it's kind of silly. What Jim Morrison was, like he got. I don't know if anyone's actually ever pointed this out up to this point in time. Jim Morrison was trained at the UCLA Film Academy, or whatever it was, film program, faculty of film. I think he went there at the same time as Francis Ford Coppola, maybe almost the same year. And so, it took me a while to realize, probably decades to realize, oh, that's what Jim Morrison was. He would have had training somewhere along the line, I suspect, as an actor. Or at least he would have been thinking about portraying actors on the screen. And this is what he really was. He was one of the greatest actors of all time, because he was acting not just when he was on stage. So he's acting being a poet, for example. And he even had his longtime girlfriend, Pam Corson, fooled. She wanted him to retire so they could go live in some fancy house someplace. They'd fix it up all fancy. She'd dress up all fancy. He might dress up all fancy. And they'd have fantastic gardens, all fancy. And he'd do that on a poet's salary. Stupid idea, right? She wanted him to give up the rock and roll thing, like the touring around. A person can't live being a poet.
Well, he'd already made himself as a. I think he could have. I disagree. If you sure you can't sell yourself as a poet if just off the hop, but he had already. He was Jim Morrison. That was his brand. He had created this super brand that he could have done a lot of things. He could have done a lot of things.
He did.
And
He actually did poetry.
Money.
He did poetry recordings. Do you know how much those things sold? Chicken feed. Right? I might be one of the few people who actually one of those recordings. So, same sort of thing. He actually published his own books.
There's
poems.
People might not make something right away, but they might make something later on off of the work that they did way back when. I don't know. I think there's always value in pursuing arts that mean something to a person at the time. If you really if it's important to you and you put your soul into it and you get it done. I mean, somebody might look at it. You may be a starving artist for 50 years, but then somebody might latch onto it.
So he published his own books. He made some money off of that. It was But then, how many people do you know? Well, you wouldn't know too many people have doors out. So how many people have? Like I got pretty well. I could think one of his volumes of poetry and stuff like that. But then I got a
he was
degree
too
in
busy
English and specialized
dying to focus on living anyway.
Well, he eventually killed himself. He got tired, I think, of death on the installment book plan, which is what alcoholism is. You see, the other thing is he was an actor, right? She wasn't recognized. Now, he's such a good actor that I read his poetry and he almost fools me. It almost fools me. But, he was not really a singer, but he does a pretty good job. I mean, it was fascinating. I liked his formulas, like he was born in 1944. He would have been about 12 years old when Elvis hit, and I don't think he was so much a fan of Elvis, but he was later on, about 12 years later, in 1966, he was trying to come up with a formula for affecting people when they're on stage or whatever, and he tried to incorporate Elvis Presley kind of hysteria, but also he was old enough to, he wasn't really that old. He was, when Sinatra hit, he wasn't even alive. And but the other person who influenced him was interesting.
No, he's just one of the.
Would be a good cover.
It would be. Maybe he's not. Yeah, and he was going solo.
Very suspicious. I'm going to have to check to see if
we're going to have
going solo. Because he's like loaded down with bags. I've never seen him loaded down with bags like that. Yeah. Anyway, lots of hanky-panky going on in this crazy alley. At any rate, what was I going to say? So, the two people he tried to base his act on or anything else was Presley and Frank Sinatra. How do you resolve that? And his vocal delivery is a bit like Frank Sinatra, and let me think, I'd actually rate him as being maybe a little bit better in No Blue Eyes, really. So, Old Gray Eyes is better than Old Blue Eyes, as far as I'm concerned. So, he manages to fool me into thinking maybe he was a singer, a songwriter too, not the greatest melodist, and that's partly because he wasn't a great singer, didn't have great range, all that kind of stuff. So, and when he got on stage, like he's the one thing he was maybe best at was reading poetry. I mean, you ever been to a poetry reading?
I don't think so.
What a yawn fest.
I don't know. It depends what you're reading.
You
know what I think of Pat Califia? Put on a poetry reading, I
it
think,
might be interesting.
yeah, there would,
Yeah.
nobody would be falling asleep to that one.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, it's usually someone reading their own poetry, well, fake poetry, and it's that's the real word for free verse, real term for free verse, and so it'll be like, how will they read it? It would be, I'm trying to find something. Yeah. So I'll do Ezra Pound. This is kind of a free verse. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. You know, it's like every word is kind of like emphasized and all this sort of stuff. They're trying to slow it down. Jim Morrison would read the stuff and his own stuff, recited or whatever, and he'd actually do it with some degree of flair. The way to read that is the apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a black bough. Something like that, you know, like you might slow it down, but get a little bit of rhythm in there, you know. When these fake poets read their poetry, you know why they can't do real verse, because they got no sense of rhythm. They're going, you know. You hear Jim Morrison, and it'll go like it'll have a flow, it'll have he knows how things are supposed to sound, and it ends up making sense and all this sort of stuff. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet, they got to say everything, wet black bough. You're going, you stupid idiot. You don't know rhythm and you claim to be a poet. Go do some plumbing. Do something useful. That's to all you fake free verse poets out there. Useless. Sorry about that, Rand. But at any rate, fairly good book, fairly informative, a little bit, as I said, breathy, a little bit hyperventilating and stuff like that. There's some purple prose in there and so on and so forth. So yeah, I don't know. The guy goes into all the various possibilities, explanations of Jim Morrison's death, you know, including he didn't actually die. He faked his death, did a Rambo and stuff like that, and off selling guns somewhere, you know, or slave trading somewhere. And yes, these things go on nowadays in the 21st century. I'm not going to say which parts of the world, but yeah, Rambo, I guess he was involved in slave trading. I don't know about that, but gun running, yeah. In Abyssinia, what was then called Abyssinia, nowadays Ethiopia, maybe some other places too. But
James isn't doing well.
A little under the weather here. The weather's pretty good, but I'm still under. Anyway, so yeah, in 1969 or thereabouts, he wrote an ode for. It was actually called Ode to L.A. You know, if you take two out of it, you know whose album title you get out of it? Ode to L.A. You get Odelay. Do you know that back album?
Oh, it's
Odelay, the one with Devil's Haircut and stuff like that.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know if Beck was referring to this poem about Brian Jones, written by him. So when does Brian Jones die? On June the 3rd, 1969. 2 years later, to the day, Morrison ends up dead. And the death was so important, he wrote a fairly long poem about Brian Jones' death. No, dude committed suicide on that day. Everyone who knew anything about him knew him in Paris, where he died. In the months before he died, was saying he was depressed, no spit. So, yeah, he killed himself. It happens when people are depressed. It happens when people are manic depressive. I don't know You know, I was telling you about all the crazy things he did. What he'd do is he'd get people to take him on the Hollywood Hills, switchbacks, and then he'd jump out of moving cars. More than once. I mean, talk about risky behavior. Or just like Pamela Des Barres was a groupie back then, kind of like the super groupie, one of the super groupies. She was talking with him. She knew him early, maybe even before he became big. And one time they're sitting together, and he just says something like, "Gotta do it." And all of it, she was sitting there dreaming and listening to music, is the way she describes it. And then what he does is he slaps her. I mean, really hard. I can't remember. I can't remember what he said. Out of nowhere. It's just like, I think he said something like, "Wake up." You know, what a guy. I mean, have you ever known anyone that out of control? I mean, I've known some people that I'd class as manic depressive, at least one. Well, and then one other guy told me he was. And nothing like this. So Jim was way out there, and I'm afraid he, in 71, summertime, early summertime, he got in one of those troughs, and he wasn't able to pull himself out. Anyway, that's probably more than that book deserves, really. But
you seem to have enjoyed it. You've been talking about it.
Well, I've only, of course, I mean, I'm only 60% through it, but I've read several biographies of him already, so I know most of the story already. It's nice to have it all together. I don't think this guy actually, he mentions mood swings and all that sort of stuff. I guess this is 91, so it was before people really started talking much about bipolar. I see it now, you know, like Pete Townsend of The Who admits he was, or volunteers he was. It's not as though someone made him admit it. Hunter S. Thompson, he looks very much as though he was like a bad case, maybe almost as bad as Jim Morrison. Who else looked like? Looks like good candidates were in the rock and roll life. Well, Bruce Springsteen has volunteered that he was. He's the kind of guy, 3-4 hour shows, and then he's doing the same thing the next night, the next night. I used to wonder, like, he put out this big album, Born to Run, and then the next album was like 70. Yeah, that was 75. Next album was 76. Now there were legal problems and that sort of stuff involved in his former manager. Well, I think he had a down period there, and I feel for him. But I've seen him live, and he was put on a pretty good show. You know, like he definitely gives a lot of quantity. You know? But he's kind of like driven. So. And I don't know what happened to him. Like, he got hold of a manager who used to be, can you believe it, a rock critic? Like, he's the guy who said, "I saw Bruce Springsteen last night." This is about 73, I think, something like that. "And I saw Rock and Roll Future." That impressed Springsteen. You know what he should have said was, "I saw Rock and Roll Past."